Wow, no game on a Sunday night. When's the last time that happened? I don't know what to do with myself. Oh, wait, I do. It's watch more draft film and talk about more off seasons because basketball does not sleep during this time of year, not even close to that. It is June. The whole league is gearing up for the draft for what is looking like everyone believes will be a seminal offseason. And facing such an offseason, maybe, or maybe it might not be that big of a deal, are the New York Knicks.
The Knicks, of course, eliminated by the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals. And they, of course, had a lot of fireworks in the last calendar year, most notably the Randall and DiVincenzo for Towns trade. And that, of course, sets an important part of the equation for the Knicks. They added Karl-Anthony Towns, who's making $53.1 million for next year. Also notable, Jalen Brunson's extension kicks in for 25-26, but Jalen Brunson didn't get that big of a raise. That's a big part of the story when he signed his extension. So he will actually be, as things are constructed right now, the third highest paid Knick, even on his new deal, $34.9 million.
Yeah, New York will have 9 players under contract next year. No free agents of really much consequence. They have Precious Achua, who they could possibly re-sign on a sign and trade. They have full bird rights on him, but they also have no rotation players who are going to be free agents next year, either other than, your mileage may vary on whether DeLon Wright and Cameron Payne are rotation players
And Shamit,
or
yeah.
not. Yeah, Shamit. Yeah, I mean, that's probably 2 rotation players among those 3 guys, depending on what the day is. And so let's look at their finances now. With those 9 players, let's say they just filled things out with minimums. They would have $4 million below the second apron. So not a ton of room to work with. They probably would be hard pressed to use the tax mid-level unless they made some cuts elsewhere or really, really managed the roster. But of course, when you use the tax mid-level, you are hard capped at that second apron. And if you only have $4 million plus minimums, you basically, by definition, have to cut some money to
Mhm.
do that. Um, and then in terms of the first apron, they are well above that, really don't have a way to, they're basically right at it right now with only 9 guys. So they, again, don't have a way to use the mid-level, full mid-level, or the
Um,
mid-level trade exception, any of that.
while we're talking about their finances, one stray note on the Knicks is I would expect Leon Rose. They don't have any at the moment. To actually, they have Memphis's. I guess that counts. To maybe acquire 1 or 2 second round picks because the second round pick exception is lower than the veteran minimum, and so if that could get them a little room, I still don't think it's prudent for them to use the taxpayer mid level if they're gonna just because it constrains front office so much. Unless you're gonna because then it just paints a different picture. But to note that they'll probably use the second round pick exception in at least 1, maybe 2 cases, which they did
Yeah,
not.
they also have some, and this is one of the more creative cap groups in the league. They've got PJ Tucker with a team option for next year. They've got Ariel Hookporty, who could bump it up to 10 players at 1.5 or 1.9 million. He had surgery this year. So that actually would still be a little bit below the minimum. We should probably actually pencil him in as being under contract. But the finances largely the same, but they do have players that they could possibly use to opt in and make trades and do some of the crazy stuff that they did, like with the Bridges trade. So I guess we kind of had this conversation before. Part of why we try to do it is when the team eliminated and they're fresh. So we talked about it some on Saturday. That was not a public podcast, but basically to summarize that very quickly, what we said was that this group maybe could be right back here next year. Not a team that we probably think is going to be a true threat to win the finals unless things go really, really, really right for them. Like the top of the East is open. I could see them maybe beating the Pacers, even though I thought the Pacers were clearly better. maybe a little better health from Brunson and more cohesion. And I also felt like their coach did a very good job in some things. Tom Thibodeau was much more malleable defensively than he had been, much more malleable rotation wise. Even he
Mhm.
expanded the rotation. I thought that was a big part of why they're able to be better against the Pacers later in the series. However, he also doesn't really have a great offensive system and flow. And I think this group just doesn't have enough ways to attack given the talent that they have. And I think they could also just use more shooting. Another thing that they just, Mikal Bridges taking 1-3 a game. Like they don't have a player that they can really, run shooting sets for. And I also felt like with Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns, like starting that way next year would be something I would be interested in doing. And then that makes Josh Hart possibly tradable. So I think if they kind of go the smaller, like tweak sort of route, I think Josh Hart for a guy who can shoot more would be something that I would look at. He is part of their identity, but also if you have Mitchell Robinson, like he and Hart do some of the same things. What did they have to trade, Danny?
That's not a fantastic story. They gave up a ton in the Mikal Bridges trade. So there are no clean first that the Knicks can trade because they owe their 25, their 27, their 29, and their 31 to the Brooklyn Nets. They only have one swap, so they could do some swaps in the intervening years. They could do that. That they owe a swap in 28. So maybe there's some finagling that you can do in that, like they're 26 or they're 30 or something like that. And then they have a few extra seconds. They're probably going to get the Wizards in 26 and 27, so those could be pretty juicy.
So of note, they do have that Wizards pick. This is the last year of it coming
Mhm.
up in 26, which is top 8 protected, then turns into 2 seconds. So some value there from the Wizards. Almost certainly that pick will not give me say, oh, top 8, you never know. No, the Wizards will be making dead bang sure that they keep that pick next year, particularly because they didn't have much lottery luck this season. And part of that is because the Wizards have a swap with Phoenix, and the Wizards then would also lose the ability to swap with Phoenix if they don't keep their own pick. So
Right.
they will be keeping that. It almost certainly will be 2 seconds, but still, worth something in a trade. What else do they have then?
They have a few extra seconds. None of them on quick look seem super juicy, but they have a few extras.
And they still have swaps, of course, the
Yes.
Knicks that they can get to. So that's not a insubstantial package. Josh Hart plus that could get you certainly a player. Josh Hart's a rotation player himself now. He's other teams may not be willing to deal with some of his shooting foibles. And he's obviously there's the Villanova thing, the Tibbs thing. Like he does seem to fit in better with the Knicks than anybody else, but also they need to this offense has to be more explosive, I think, because I don't know how they're going to get any better on defense. They've got Mitchell Robinson, who's a pretty good center. You got OG Bridges, who maybe disappointed some in a little bit in every area, but he at least was uh fills about as good of a role as you could have there defensively. And you've got Towns and you got Brunson still that you have to work with also. So to me, their offense just isn't good enough. If their offense was not that explosive in a lot of these games against the Pacers, and that's because they don't get enough threes and they don't space the floor enough. And so swapping out that Hart role for someone who really bombs it, like a Dante DiVincenzo type,
Well,
would
or a
be
Quentin Grimes.
useful. Yeah,
Well, but
yeah.
but
So
so one of the challenges, though, I agree with your general thesis. However, you still need that player to be at least competent defensively, because if you're going to play that player at times, even alongside Brunson and or Towns, like that becomes very combustible unless you're talking about the idea of, well, they can only hunt one guy at a time.
yeah, but then obviously, if you're hedging with Brunson, then you're gonna need guys who could fly around on the back line, or if they're gonna switch more with Towns, which they probably would, or play him next to Robinson, could definitely be kind of difficult there. So, in terms of guys that they could trade for who can shoot, I mean, it really needs to be a shooting guard. Like they don't really have a normal shooting guard that they play that they've used a lot. Now, a bought out Bradley Beal, but Phoenix wouldn't do that unless he signed for something like the mid level and gave them a big haircut. They also could use one more guy who could dribble on the perimeter. Like I think that someone who could both shoot and dribble would be kind of useful. But most of these guys make too much money, and they can't really take back more than the 19 million or so that Josh Hart is making now. You could do something lower level, like if Duncan Robinson became a free agent, maybe you could figure out a way to sign him, or but I wouldn't trade Josh Hart for like Grayson Allen, who's making similar money, unless
I agree.
Phoenix really wanted to throw something in. And there just aren't that many guys, like Kevin Herter from the Bulls. Like I'm talking about someone who has to be a little better defensively, a little better a player than that. Otherwise, you're just better off keeping Josh Hart, who you do need as a backup wing. They would be pretty light on wings to only have Anunoby and Bridges, basically, unless you think Pacom Dadier is going to get anything. So I'm not sure, even though that's kind of my prescription for them, ideally, of how they're going to get there. Exactly. Kevin Durant, they just, to me, I guess this is where we get into kind of the bigger fish discussion, because I think maybe part of the reason you do go this bigger fish route, because you have a lot of good players, and you even have a lot of good players who may become more expensive later, Mikal Bridges being one of those. So I think there isn't necessarily the let's make some tweaks. Now, you could always maybe do that at next trade deadline too, right? Like that sort of a deal doesn't need to be made this summer necessarily. But some of the teams that are trading guys, presumably the Bucks are going to be trading Giannis. We still haven't heard anything on that yet. And we know Phoenix is probably going to be trading KD. Obviously, KD would be very useful for them, as he is on basically every team, even still. And what do the Bucks or Phoenix want? Like Karl-Anthony Towns? You trade him? Like, do the Bucks just want to get a couple of lower end players and continue to try to compete because they don't have their draft picks? Or are they trying to get because the Knicks, to me, if the Bucks are trying to rebuild, don't have anywhere near the best package.
Right. I think the Suns they're more compelling for the Suns because we know the Suns are going to try.
Yes, they have already traded away their picks, and the Bucks again. I'm sure once the Giannis news comes out, we'll try to break that down more thoroughly. But the Knicks don't have the best package there now. Maybe Giannis, like KD, if he really wanted to go to New York, he could. I think he could probably get there. Actually,
I think so too.
Now it would be a hell of a negotiation between the Knicks and the Suns of how much they're going to give up in terms of what's on the current roster, and the salary matching would be difficult. Like the Suns are probably going to ask for OG Anunoby, and that's an interesting question, right? Would you give up OG Anunoby for KD with this group?
I mean, you're shortening your window, but I don't know that their window is that long to begin with because KD is so much older.
I mean, you would try to do it for Towns, right? If you could do it for Towns, you would. Hey, and remember, Karl-Anthony Towns and Devin Booker, such incredible friends. D'Angelo Russell is a free agent, Danny. He can come in and play point guard for him.
Woo-hoo. Wait, is Simmons in that group too, or is he? No, I don't think he is.
No,
he's available.
I don't think does Ben Simmons have any friends in the NBA? So. Yeah, I think it really, the KD thing, we said it with respect to Minnesota. We're saying it with respect to New York. And, that's another issue. Who has the better package between New York and Minnesota? Probably just whoever wants to throw their guy in. But to me, Anunoby, incredibly valuable player. And also, he's even more valuable because of the way that they are constructed.
Yes.
However, if you got KD, he's just so much better than Anunoby. I think you still have to pull the trigger, particularly because Anunoby's deal is not going to age particularly well. Now, depends what KD's contractual requirements are going to be too, but only putting 2 more years on it, it's maybe not the end. I mean, OG, remember, he signed for 5. So he's a player type that's incredibly valuable, but also, I think even he puts a little bit of a limit on what your offense can be, even if, of course,
Um,
defense is,
I,
what something they need to get better at too.
I don't want to get into all the logistics of it, but a Suns Knicks trade would also be hilarious because you can't like doing swaps with the team that already owes so many picks would be complicated. I'm not going to go through year by year of what the logistics would be, but it would be a weird negotiation to be sure.
Yeah, well, again, like we talked about this with the Suns before, that they swaps might be more valuable to them than any other team because they know that their Horcrux swaps are going to be an absolutely terrible pick.
Hmm.
So that actually could be a way for any team, basically, to provide value because the Suns have these picks. When we say Horcrux pick, by the way, just a reminder of what that is. Like Lord Voldemort split his soul into 7 pieces and hid them all in various places. Like that's what the Suns did with their swap. So they swapped with one team, then they swapped that's the worst of the swap picks that they already had to be the worst of 3 picks, and now even the worst of 4 picks in some instances. And so yeah, if you can
Um,
take the worst of 4 picks and swap that, then you're in
so
pretty good shape.
So I looked it up. They could do that as I see it in 26 and 2030. Both of those would
Yeah.
theoretically, with a Knicks Suns trade, the Suns could get the better of the pick that they have left at the end of that shuffle and the Knicks pick.
In terms of their free agents, I don't know what Achua's market would be. He again might be someone that they would want to re-sign. Like, that's the other question too. Do they go into the second April? Would they be willing to do that? I think you probably want to stay out because, of course, the next thing we're going to discuss is the extensions there. They will surely be in it next year, in 26, 27. And so you probably don't want to do that just to get matching salary with Achua. And Robinson also, like he could be possibly matching salary in a trade as well. But I think I don't know that they're going to get a better center than him for the amount that he's making. I can't believe I'm saying this, somewhat optimistic on his health because
You looked
he
good.
always like looked heavy and wasn't moving well after all these other injuries. He's moving great this year. So I'm actually hopeful that his injury issues are behind him. But you might say, hey, he actually, if you can get off him now for value on one of the rare times he's healthy, you should. He's 27. So they definitely have matching talent they could put together in a move, and maybe that could be you could get Hart and Robinson and Bridges, and that would get you there for KD pretty much. Uh, is that like that's 3 rotation players for Phoenix? Anyway, that's probably enough on like the big fish
Hmm.
aspect. We may even see others become available, like the Celtics guys would be another. Could be. I mean, Derek White would be an unbelievable fit for their group, but I don't think they have the scratch together. I think the Celtics would just be looking for the best asset package if they ever decided to move him. Or Drew Holiday, I'm sure, is very available too. But to me, he's kind of duplicative with Hart. He's better than Hart, but also makes a lot more and is older.
So I think we can jump to extensions, and that starts with Mikal Bridges. And so Bridges making 24.9 million for the 25-26 season. That is already locked in. They can't renegotiate and extend him because they're not anywhere close to cap space. So the deal that Bridges is eligible to sign this offseason would add 4 years and $156.2 million. So that would start at about 34.9 and then it would run up to 43. Oh, and that would end in theoretically 29-30. And so the thinking for a long time, Bridges has been on one of the best value contracts in the league for a while now, is that the maximum allowable raise. Oh, you're doing off one of the best value contracts. That's a great value. That's a steal. It's not as extreme maybe as the Jalen Brunson extension a year ago, but it is in the same spirit. I know you and John already talked about this a fair extent, but you and I have both toned down some of our optimism on Mikal Bridges in part because even though he had a larger role in Brooklyn, that hasn't necessarily translated to New York. And also because, and this happens a lot for guys who are very good defenders in their early 20s or their mid 20s, it's that perimeter defense is a young man's game. And so Bridges is not the defender now that he was in Phoenix, and the reduction in his offensive role coming out of Brooklyn did not lead to a revival in Bridges' defense, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, he had moments in the playoffs to be sure. Like Game 5, he was excellent against Halliburton, and he made those plays at the end of the Celtics series, and he's valuable there. But I said basically with John, I mean, maybe this is already done because of the deal that they made in terms of him taking this maximum extension. But I don't love that for the New York Knicks, even with the cap going up. We're concerned about his declining effectiveness, and because he's been on this cheap contract, because you gave up the 5 first-round picks for him, I think there's a feeling that like, oh yeah, 4 for 156, like, yeah, he'll take that and it'll be a bargain for the Knicks. But I mean, I don't think so, right? Like he's not as good as Anunoby. Anunoby got paid a ton,
Mm-hmm.
but he shouldn't be making as much as Anunoby. And then I'll put it this way: if I'm the Knicks, I'm not offering him that full 4-year deal. I will offer him a 3-year deal, maybe at that. Or I will offer him a 4-year deal for less. And if not, then hey, we can go into the season. That's no problem. Or we'll even go take it all the way to free agency. Or maybe it doesn't work out. We end up having to use you in a trade. And that's the other problem too, is in terms of the timing, the day that he is eligible for that deal is July 6th. But if he actually ends up signing it within 6 months of trade deadline, then you can't trade him either. So that's another concern if I'm New York. But this is one where would be willing to be a little more comfortable being uncomfortable, because he just didn't have as good of a season as we wanted. And hey, you know what? If he has an unbelievable season next year, or he's in the middle of an unbelievable season, if he's being the player that we traded for him, I mean, I don't think they're going to change their coach, but I do think there could be another coach that would get a little bit more out of him. But, he just has limitations. Like, he can't do anything in the basket. He's not very physical. He never rebounds. And he's not like a great movement three-point shooter. He just has never gotten the volume up to where it needs to be, unless he's just like getting the ball every single time like he was in Brooklyn. And so with all those being the case, like, yeah, you can come off the pick and roll for some mid-range jumpers. He can't beat a switch though.
Mm-hmm.
Or he'll work in a position and shoot like a fadeaway from 17 and never actually find someone on a pass. So he actually threw some nice alley-oops to Mitchell Robinson, but other than that, he doesn't really draw the defense in the way where he can be a big passer. So I'm just like, you know what? I'll like, if you perform at the way we thought you're going to perform, like, we'll pay you appropriately, but we're not going to get locked into like a crazy deal. But again, it could just already be done as part of the trade, basically.
And the Knicks could theoretically have fear 2026 may have more teams that have spending power. Definitely will have more than 25 because no one has spending power this year. But would Bridges be the belle of the ball? I'm fairly skeptical. If he has a great year, but if he has a great year, you can retain him. And I think that teams have become, you brought up being uncomfortable in terms of the extension. I agree with you there. And we also could see it slide back in terms of just having bird rights that you can pay as much or more
Yeah.
than anybody else.
Yeah.
And so I'm a little bit more optimistic. Like, I think that if this, like with this extension, I'm more close to like just offering it, but I definitely wouldn't like do a player option or anything on the last year. But even with that, I don't think it's the best outcome. I think that you can, if you can't get any discount from that, then you can go into the season, you can go into the off season, and you're probably not going to get burned. And like, also the idea I brought up bird rights is like, they brought him in there for the team is very committed to him, and maybe he'd be pissed about the extension, but it's not like there's going to be a perfect storm, like KD to the Warriors, where it's like a team that's as good as the Knicks that also has that amount of money just in straight up cap space. Like, I sincerely doubt that is going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, the Knicks have largely taken care of players. We haven't seen them
Mhm.
in this position where they're doing a lot of negotiation. They are a player-focused team, and that helped them get Brunson on that extension, which really is making a lot of this current roster possible. Karl-Anthony Towns, I kind of left it again with John about what I thought about it. I don't see any great impetus to do anything here. He's
No.
owed two more years guaranteed, and then as a player option for $61 million in 27-28. Maybe there would be a thought like, well, if you could get him to decline that and pay him less going out, you might consider it. But even then, you're talking about 32, 33 years old. I feel no urgency again to make that move. And again, you also run into the possibility of not being able to trade him as well. So to me, I don't feel like a massive impetus to change this group a ton. I mean, it honestly, the coach would be the thing I'd be looking at more,
Same.
but just to get more of an offensive system, again, they exceeded expectations this year. Probably that's not going to happen. So, but that like they still have that in their back pocket. I don't see any reason to be like locking in on an extension of a deal that is already just like horrifically long.
And
Okay.
incredibly
Yeah.
expensive for what he brought to the table. And briefly, Mitchell Robinson's also extension eligible. To me, the way that would actually happen as the Knicks would be, remember, if you're in the last year of your contract, you can do it up until the end of the season. Would be if you make it through the trade deadline, Mitchell Robinson's still around, playing well enough and all that, then you figure it out at that point. Then you don't tie your hands. At that point, you get something Robinson. But at that point, he would have an understanding of what his market is. But maybe you can come to a deal.
Yeah, one other guy that just seems kind of Knicksy if he ever became available, and we'll talk about this team later too, would be Kawhi Leonard. If the Clippers were just like, hey, we are so lucky that he's healthy right now, he might be tradable. We should just do it. Like that would be a Clippersy type of move. Anything else on these guys? I guess like they're remaining free agents. We talked about their financial situation. Maybe they could throw a little bit more than the minimum at a couple of these guys. Again, maybe just for trade matching. Like they could offer Payne a little bit more, or like I said, they have Achua who could, especially if you're going to start Robinson at center, that makes Achua more useful as a backup center.
Mm-hmm.
But he kind of disappointed this year. He started with the hamstring injury, never really got going much. If he was willing to come back for like, $4 million instead of $6 million, then maybe I would consider it. But other than that, I just, go grab whoever the minimum du jour is. They have playing time to offer, or hopefully if you're the front office, you're like, yeah, Tyler Kolek and Paco Daddier, like, let's see what you guys look like at the start of the year. And if it doesn't work out, then we'll go get somebody else.
Well, and another reason,
and they have a Hookporty too, who they want to get a look at too. So that's maybe another reason that Chua won't be back.
And also the lack of true distance for actual veteran players between the vet minimum and the taxpayer mid-level makes it just hard to justify using it. In their circumstance, you could just say like, hey, we could do the minimum and major market, have potential play time. But with the Chua, for me, the issue is more just he should have better offers, whether it's money or just role. Like, if this team is actually going to play you every night,
it's going to be a lot of people who don't have better offers. I believe. I mean,
but
he's a guy that I think has,
like you could get one or the other, probably not both.
Anything more on these guys?
No.
All right, Kon Knueppel out of Duke. Let's get a little summary on his bio.
Sure. Born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Mr. Basketball his senior year, was a 5-star recruit on Rivals, 4-star on ESPN, was, 10 to 20 was kind of the prospect range for him. Both of his parents played college ball in Wisconsin. And then I think the place that I want to start, Kai, that's the bio, is his measurements, just because Knueppel will start with this, like, he is a shooter type. We'll talk about how good he is at that and what else he could potentially do outside of it. But unfortunately didn't do athletic testing at the combine due to an injury. I don't know what that injury was, but an injury.
Yeah. That now he is if he's healthy before the draft, he is required to do that at a team testing facility. Now, we haven't seen this really come up yet of a guy who, like, maybe because he's not that athletic, like maybe he just made up this injury and is just going to not end up doing it like that. That might be a tactic that guys go to. I'm sure, though, he needs to support it in some way, but that's not that hard to do. So, yeah, we didn't do the athletic testing. Anything else on his physical that he had bio-wise? Or
Physical profile stuff. Oh, so
yeah,
first of all, Knueppel born August 2005, so his rookie year will be his age 20 season. I've been thankful that a lot of the one and done rookies this year are younger. Knueppel's a little bit older. Do you want me to do the physicals right now?
yeah, that's it.
So 6'5" without shoes, 220 pounds, 6'6.5" wingspan, 8'5.5" standing reach. A couple of comparables for that. Incidentally, his measurements are almost exactly the same as Dillon Brooks when he was a prospect, which I thought was fascinating. And the reason why it's hard for Knueppel for some of the comps is that he's heavier than a lot of the guys who have these general things. Similar to Corey Kispert, a little bit shorter and shorter wingspan than Grady Dick. Though weirdly, he has a longer standing reach. Like that, I had to spend some time thinking about how that works. I think it's
Yeah,
shoulder width.
shorter or longer neck.
Yeah, well, neck and shoulder width. And so
That was Elton Brand's secret, according to Jerry Cross. That he was 6'9", but he had a short neck, so he had a big wingspan, high standing reach, which
yeah,
actually totally makes sense.
and so Knueppel, yeah, so 6'6", 6'7" if we're saying with shoes, but basically an even wingspan, depending on how we're classifying things. And so so in terms of what position he probably defends, I'd say he's more a 2. Threes have gotten bigger in the NBA. So do you agree with me that like generally a guy who's 6'5" without shoes with a 6'6" wingspan is about a 2?
I think so. Let's talk about it. Because yeah, like Kispert was an interesting comparison. I think that's kind of what I view as maybe more of his low end in theory. Um, but let me go through the rest of the physical profile, then we can talk about what position he is because that's and what he can guard because that's fascinating. Can't really jump at all.
Nope.
Off of one or off of two. Now he would get to the rim a lot, but he really has to load up. Like he can't. He's tried 4 dunks on the year. He made 2 of them. He did try 2 really speculative ones that just got sent right back in his face on the 2 that he missed. But if he tries to dunk off of 2 feet, he can't dunk from outside of the charge circle. Off of one, it's still really not any better. And so when he drives, he just has more of kind of a 2-foot game. Stop and then maybe pivot, step through. It's kind of more of that old school fundamental game. And I did think his first step was not bad, in part because he has a good old school triple threat game with a live dribble. Like it was interesting that both he and Flag had that. I don't know if that was necessarily something that's being taught at Duke or just that they both had it already. And so that was interesting. So his first step wasn't too bad, but steps 2 through 10 are pretty slow.
Yeah.
In a straight line. He's pretty slow in a straight line. Laterally, I actually thought it was pretty decent. I thought he was able to move his feet reasonably well, stay in front of guys, and then his strength is a big, especially in today's league on both ends of the floor, is a really big asset to be 220 for this sort of player. If he is going to play the 2, which he probably is going to have to most of the time, because he's not Dillon Brooks from a defensive standpoint.
Correct.
But and the short arms aren't great either when he's trying to contest shots. Like you can see that for sure. And he doesn't get off the ground really on these contests. He does a lot of like just kind of moving towards guys with his arms up along the ground. But he moves his feet decently. Do you agree with that? That he showed decent lateral movement?
Laterally, yeah, I thought he was decent. His straight line stuff, like if he was recovering from being screened off, that I actually really didn't like. But the lateral stuff, yeah, I thought it was fine. And just as a point of clarity, this is a public pod. When I'm bringing up the physical comps, that is sheerly the measurements that we have. It's not their play style or anything else. So like saying that he measures like Dillon Brooks does not mean that they're any way similar. It's just that's who he's.
It's just the chalk outline.
Yeah, it's the chalk outline with weight. And so that's
and hopefully still alive, but yeah,
ideally. But yeah, in terms of that, I do largely agree with you that moving his feet laterally was some of the better stuff. And yes, for his first step, like getting into position and like he moves reasonably well. Like yeah, as an off-ball mover, like going around, he's not a blur out there like some of the best guys in this vein, but he moves. And I think the other thing we can tie in with this is that Knueppel, I like his overall activity level. Like both
Yeah.
on offense and on defense. Like he's mentally and physically, he's trying to do stuff. And when you talk about this player type, and I did some digging just for funsies on the steal rates, which I'll bring up later in terms of like those types. I think Knueppel is more industrious on both ends of the floor than a lot of those guys are.
So let's bear with us here. Obviously, for this sort of guy, the offense is the big selling point. But I think we can both agree he can shoot the ball, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's put a pin on the offense because to me, actually, one of the biggest things, and it's so interesting that we do all these and we don't even look at these guys until during the playoffs and like the like you're seeing the crucible, right? And so that's what I'm always thinking about with these players, and maybe why my decision making on this disagrees with a lot of people. So for me, there are a lot of guys who can shoot, but can he hold up defensively as a starter is the question. And I actually, again, considering that most guys who can shoot like him are not going to be great defensive players, I actually think within a system and one-on-one, I think he actually has a decent chance of holding up. Like there are definitely problems, right? Like if going up against a quicker player in space, someone who's athletic who can rise up, like he's not going to be particularly effective challenging a jumper. Like the way he's going to need to play is get into guys' bodies, force them one way. But then I think if he can kind of stay with them a little bit, and then he's not really going to get knocked backwards. That didn't happen at the college level, and he's just turning 20 shortly, so he's going to be a strong dude. You think of like the way that someone like Max Strus can defend. Now Strus is way better as an athlete. Like you think of some of
Yes.
the dunks that Max Strus has had. So he's not like that. But in terms of just that barrel chest being strong, and that's what today's league is. It's you can dish out the punishment with that forearm on the offensive end, and you can absorb it on the defensive end. And I mean, we obviously don't watch all the same film. I just didn't see that many instances where he was just like getting torched and blown by. Did you?
No, I didn't. And then the other thing that I was thinking watching Knueppel, again, the playoffs are a lens, is the rise of zone. And that I think he's a reasonably intelligent guy. He's active mentally. I brought that up earlier. And so in some of the ways that teams are using zones now, if he's on kind of the back part of it, he competed pretty well. It was something I specifically looked at in his film because it's happening more now. When I thought he was worse when he had a speed disadvantage than when he had a power disadvantage. So when he was guarding a bigger guy,
Yeah.
he competed. He slowed him down a little bit. Like he's not great. Like his floor on defense is lower because he's not that athletic and all this stuff. But his expected value is higher than some of these guys because he actually tries and he understands what he is and what he isn't. And so, there are some of those like thin shooters more who are like I've brought this up with Buddy Hield before, that when they get in a mismatch, they just crumple up like a piece of paper.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I don't know if that's healed. Like he's at least strong. Like
but
and
he
he'll
doesn't
rebound and
always
stuff.
like if he gets
Actually,
it
like
bigger.
healed to me is actually an interesting comp for him.
I think so too.
That's one I would
Except
because I
we'll get
obviously
into
I
this
was
later, but
struggling to not have it just be some white dude, but
um
so that actually is a good one because we'll talk more about his
yeah,
offense and maybe why
I
that
have healed
applies.
it.
Yeah.
I've healed in a different part of this too.
Yes.
And yes,
But anyway, like he's tough. He'll box out. He can't like sky for rebounds, but like he's fundamentally sound. He's always turning his head. He sees ball man. He's not just like giving up back cuts, and he'll fight against bigger players and in the post and stuff. So I actually, we're not talking about someone who's going to be as good as like a Brandon Pajemski or something because Pajemski is like pretty athletic and averaged more steals. And Knueppel also doesn't have good hands defensively, really.
no,
Like he's not really going for strips. Like the steals that he would make would sort of be like anticipation plays on
or
occasion,
yeah.
or the ball would just come right to him sometimes too.
Yeah, so like I would say for me, the defensive film on Knueppel was better than Dalton Connect. And then it was different than Grady Dick. Like I described looking back at my notes, I described Grady Dick steals as right place, right time, which is kind of what it is with Knueppel as well. Um, Dick is a little bit taller. But all that. So yeah, I mean, I think that and his Knueppel's strength is intriguing because there are ways that a team can utilize that. And again, like he's aware of what's going on. He's trying. Like it's
Yeah, he
not
stays
as
in a
bad as I
stance
feared.
most of the time unless
Yeah,
he's tired.
yeah, no,
Got the competes getting over screens well enough.
yes, exactly. And so yeah,
Good
I
communicator too. Like they're just as if they were switching because Duke largely would switch 1 through 4 on the perimeter, but then the 5 man they wouldn't. So you got to see him get over screens, but also switch. And he was just good communicating. He wouldn't make mistakes when there would be a switch, or if there was, he would compete pretty hard to get back onto the roll man. If the guy tried to slip out of there, he would communicate defensively in transition. So, like, I think he's gonna. I mean, I don't know for sure. You never know for sure until you see a guy in the league, and the short arms and the lack of playmaking. Like, I don't think he's gonna make guys uncomfortable. We're not talking about like Doug McDermott out here either.
well, so speaking of the playmaking, so Knueppel 2% steal rate on his year at Duke. I'll give a few notables in multiple directions. McDermott is the all-time low mark here, 0.4%. Stauskas was
Yeah,
around 1.
McDermott is basically the lowest blocks and steals guy in NBA history, like in his
Yes.
at the NBA level, ever.
So again, 2% for Knueppel. Stauskas was 1%. Connect was 1.3. Buddy Hield was 2.3 career, but about 2 his senior year. Jimmer was 2.2. Grayson Allen was 2.1. So he's more in the like more active group than the more passive group. But again, this is still not fantastic company overall.
No, it's not. But I think a lot of those names you said, Connect, McDermott, who I brought up, most of those guys, Duncan Robinson. Defensively,
1.2.
I think he's. I'm sorry.
Duncan Robinson was 1.2%. I looked that up too.
Yeah, like these sorts of guys. No, I think he's going to be a lot better. Like I don't think he'll be as good as Strus because he doesn't quite have that sort of athleticism. And I mean, Strus is older, obviously, but Strus is like a little, more fiery, intense of a guy. But I like again, I think I think he'd be totally solid in a team concept. I may be wrong because his arms are just too short. Like he's going to struggle to close out on guys too because of the short arms as well. But he anticipates, he moves while the ball's in the air, and he can cover a little bit of ground at least. And then he also can decelerate reasonably well on a closeout.
Mhm.
So I think he's going to actually be fine. If he's your worst defender, you'll survive. That's my feeling.
And I like you. I have the same general thing, though I will note like there is the big downside risk, which is oh crap, it just absolutely doesn't work. And I would price that in if I were drafting him of the like maybe it just isn't there. And because like his athleticism isn't fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty fair way. I'm interested that we both saw this the same way because it's I mean, one play that I liked, I had this in my notes, was it was in the Illinois game. Knueppel did a dig as the guard drive, got him to bobble it, and then dove and forced the actual turnover. And it's not an amazing, like play as a like defensive savant or anything like that, but it is one of the ways that an effort guy can help out a little bit. Makes somebody think about their dribble, wasn't doing it, wasn't sacrificing anything to make it happen. It's like he does those sorts of plays already.
So let's talk about his offense here. What is the first topic you want to hit on in
Well,
that
we should
regard?
start with the shooting, considering it's the calling card. And if you push it out to per 36, Knueppel 40.6% on 6.3 per 36. That's a good rate. You could see it be a little bit higher. And then the other thing, which I think is a part of Kelvin Pelton's stats projections, is that he made 91% of his free throws, taking about 4
Yeah.
per 36.
That is a crazy number, by the way. Like that's like you even some of the best shooters, for their freshman year, they're making maybe 85%. Like you don't see a number with a 9 in front of it almost ever, particularly not for a guy in his first year of college basketball.
And in terms of that kind of shooter, like there were moments in the film where I just went like, he doesn't seem like an oh shit shooter. Like the it's not a 5 alarm fire. But part of the reason why some of it's that some of his misses were a little bit like clunky, but some of it was also just the nature of the team he was on, where they had better threats, and that allowed Knueppel to get better looks than some of these guys because you have Cooper Flag on your team. It's going to generate those kinds of shots. But I thought that overall as a catch and shoot shooter, and this is an important delineation with Knueppel, I thought that there was enough that you really liked here. And so overall, Knueppel on catch and shoot threes was 43.3% on 178. That's pretty good volume. The success rate, of course, is high. And it wasn't extreme versatility for college film for a guy who has that many, but it was enough to make me feel like that could come along. Now he doesn't have athleticism in terms of like that the elements of off-ball shooting that can go that direction, but everything else, I think he at least has the building blocks to be a very good off-ball shooter.
Yeah, I don't know that he's gonna be just one of these absolutely ridiculous ones. Like, I thought Heald was a great call because the way that they shoot is somewhat similar. He shoots
Mhm.
more of a set shot. Now, Heald again was a bit older than old Kon before he was drafted. But and he's sped up his release. I think Kon can do that as well. Like his form is not absolutely classic. Like what his makes are absolutely beautiful, but he's got like a little more left-hand involvement than you'd like. And shooting on the move can get a little bit more difficult for him when he doesn't have his feet set
Mhm.
perfectly. He can't really like he doesn't have the verticality like put his foot in the ground and rise up off, if he's moving fast, he's not able to stop quickly and
Yeah.
shoot it.
Like he can't do
And
what Clay does, what Clay did in his
no.
best years.
And also he, if he's contested, has to rush it a little bit, like that would break down some. You talked about some of the inconsistencies, some of the misses he would have. That would happen for sure. But I thought that despite that, his ability to work off of screens was very solid. Now, a lot of times that would lead to the drive, which we could talk about some in a moment too. But I thought he just was very good setting up screens. They would run a lot of wide pin downs for him out of the corner. And part of because the fact that he's stronger and more physical, a lot of guys will just sort of get like tied up there. They'll get top sided. They can't get to where they want. That's not going to happen for him. He'll be strong enough to actually come off the screen and use it. And then he's able to he's got a pretty good handle, maybe even a great handle for this type of player. And if this is the type of player we're even talking about, which will be another discussion if he is just like the shooter type. And so he's able to make the catch. If it's not there right away, maybe he's not gonna fire it through a really small window, but then he can pump fake, come off the screen again, and get himself a larger window. He really just has a great understanding of angles and screening and rescreening, and he's physical enough to really win those battles a lot of the time, force the guy into the screen, etc. So I thought that was good. And then the off the dribble shooting from three, that was the numbers on that were very bad. I don't know. You chuckled. So what do you got there?
Well, I mean, 3 for 21, 14% on pull-up threes, and then he was 43%, which was better on pull-up twos. And what's funny is the makes. I got like I was because I watched a lot of those. Like the makes actually looked quite good. Like there was one where it was a step back three, and you're like,
The
ooh,
the three makes it. How long did it take you to watch those?
about
Yeah.
25 seconds. But it was one because I watched it in randomized film. I was like, oh, that looks really good, and then I'm like, wait, he only made three. This is one of three. But it's I think that the way Knueppel could become a pull-up shooter, were that to come, would be basically he takes the pull-up threes that are basically a modified set shot, where it's not the like flying in and doing it off the dribble, but they give you a little bit of space and you can get just your shot prep. I think his shot prep is generally pretty good, but he can tighten that up. Anybody can tighten that up, and then it's just a slightly modified set shot. It's not doing what Steph is doing or anything like that. I think there's potential in it, even though the numbers weren't there.
Yeah, and I so part of that with the sample being small, like it looked like he could be a pretty good shooter. We didn't see a ton of him just high pick and roll from up top, get the screen, bigs in a drop, shoot the three, moving forward. A lot of his shots that were technically off the dribble would be these ones where he'd make the catch, take a dribble, and then fire it maybe a little bit moving sideways or something. So I actually went back and watched his threes off the dribble at the AAU level, which was
Mm.
actually, that's almost 2 years ago now, summer of 23, spring and summer of 23. And he looked better with those. So I think he's a good enough shooter that I'm not worried about that 3 out of 21 off the rip. Like, that wasn't necessarily what he was being asked to do. He wasn't getting a lot of reps, and maybe even he was told to not do that much. So, um, I was very impressed by his drive game.
Yeah.
He actually shot 62% at the rim on 4 attempts a game. And we talked about how his situation at Duke was pretty good, where he usually was playing with a center who could do something. He's playing with Flag, didn't necessarily have the best defender on him. And their offense was pretty modern and creative, where they just had him coming off a lot of NBA type of sets with regard to screening and stuff. And he had guys setting him up for catch and shoots. But I felt like his handle was actually excellent. I don't think he has a point guard level of handle just because he's a little bit too slow. But in short areas, he is very comfortable. Like, if he had the guy trailing, he would curl into the lane, or if he ran like a quick pick and roll or turned a wide pin down into a pick and roll, or he was attacking from up top, he could get into tight areas, keep his dribble, use his body and his strength to hold off the guy from behind, and then actually make some pretty nice passes as well. He had some great alley oops. The game that Cooper Flag went down, I watched that one with a sprained ankle against Georgia Tech. He had 8 assists. He really led them back. He had 28 and 8, and he wasn't used as much, obviously, when Flag was available, but when they wanted to put it in his hands more, he did deliver in that respect in the ACC tournament, which they won. And so, like, part of why his passing was decent and he's able to find the big is because he's able to just be confident at spots. Even when he would come to a 2-foot stop, he could pump fake. He was able to step through. He just had a lot of confidence in short areas in a way that you don't necessarily see for a player like this, because these guys are usually a little bit weak. They're a little bit small. Like, he's able to use his body and be aggressive and control space to where he can make plays, even though he's not that athletic. And yeah, there would be times when he would get over aggressive and just get absolutely packed at the rim on just some, trying to finish with 2 feet and or he'd step through. But he has a pretty high skill level. He had one beautiful reverse, like left hand, left foot finish, stepping underneath the basket. So I actually really liked what he was able to do getting to the basket. And I don't know how much of that is going to be like set the pins up, high pick and roll for him, unless it's late in the clock. We can have that discussion. But I thought when he got into the paint, he was much more effective than the usual guy of this ilk.
I agree, and some stats on that just because I found this fascinating. So Knueppel, sterling points per possession on spot ups, 1.4 basically points per possession, which on spot ups, which is 98th percentile, and part of that is the shooting. 1.482 on no dribble jumpers is fantastic, but that leaves you with about 1.2 on the drives, and that's a good number especially for this player type. And the way that I would
and also
describe,
it wasn't like he was getting to the rim, but it wasn't, oh my God, they have so much spacing. They have a stretch 5. He's just
no,
driving. There's nobody there. Like, these were contested plays. Like, he was in a good situation, but not like
yeah,
some where just, he had 5
yeah,
or
they're
4 great shooters
a
around or something
layup
like
line,
that.
or like I sometimes joke about this,
Yeah.
like the Euro, like an on-ball Euro transition film where there's just not a big there.
Yeah.
They're just running down. No, it's not like that. It was usually a contest. And I thought that was pretty good. But the delineation that I would draw in terms of this part of Knueppel's offensive game is I like him a lot better with an advantage than trying to create the advantage. And that's like, so for example, not effective as a scorer as a pick and roll ball handler, he only had 12 ISOs in the whole year in that
Yeah.
circumstance. But
It's hard for him because he doesn't really have any kind of 1-foot game getting to
exactly.
the basket. Also, no floater at all. Like, that's something
He
that,
took did you
yeah.
see the stats on this? Because I found
Yeah,
it
it was like
hilarious.
1 out of 6 or
Yeah,
something.
he took 5, I think it was 5 the whole year, and he made like 1 or 2 of them. And I was just like,
Yeah,
yeah, it was
but
1 for
like
5.
there's no reason that he can't develop that shot,
No.
I would say. And he would kind of get into the lane and shoot a lot of like little fadeaways and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, he's
Oh.
got good touch. I think that's something, if it became a priority for him, which it probably should, frankly,
Mhm.
he could be effective at it. It was
Yeah.
just, it was a little weird to me that they didn't take any of those.
Yeah. And so Knueppel, to me, he has the offensive game of somebody who he's not gonna, as you said, like set up pins and knock him down. Like, that's not gonna be his game. But if there is a way for there to be an advantage, then he could do well. And that's not just like some of the scoring stuff. It's also that was where I liked his passing. So they ran 197 pick and rolls with him as the ball handler, including passes. And the passes, I thought they looked pretty good. There was a funny thing in the randomized film where at first I'm like, oh, he's only ever passing it to the screener. Like he's only ever doing that. And this is randomized. It's just the way it happened. And then all of a sudden it started spraying it all over the floor. And what I started envisioning for Knueppel as like kind of an offensive player is that we've talked about the idea of hiding him defensively, is that he is more capable than most of these players at exploiting if they try to hide the player on him. So if it's a circumstance where the other team has Trae Young or Jalen Brunson, we just talked about the Knicks, that Knueppel either as a pick and roll ball handler or just like running that guy around, or in an interesting one that of course because Duke was more creative than most, as a screener because he's a pretty strong guy that he can make those guys work. And
Yeah.
so
They would even post him up
yeah,
by the way as well. It would even run ATOs for him to get post ups where he was pretty effective. And he could either like get to his spot against smaller guys and then like up fake and step through and use his body, or he could shoot a fadeaway over those guys too. So that's another way maybe you could get a few points here and there.
exactly. And he's, mentally engaged enough to try to take advantage of those. And I think the coaching staff would too. And, coaches sometimes like these more kind of like rugged guys because who are willing to do that sort of stuff. And I think Knueppel, I mean, I really enjoyed watching the times that he screened for Flag or Flag screened for him. We saw a fair amount of both of those. And again, I talked about the passing that he can hit the guy on the opposite side. He doesn't have good enough passing. Like I could go through my elements that we talked about before in terms of vision, mentality, and vocabulary. Like I don't think he's best in mentality. Vision's fine, vocabulary's fine, but for what you're looking for, like that's totally good. Like it can fit within that reasonably well. And for somebody who kind of has these elements at functionally, let's call it NBA age 20, like that bodes reasonably well. Some of these shooters come in way older than Knueppel is already. And like and the fact that he kind of had to fill a largely secondary role at Duke, I think that actually it sort of works. It changes the film on him. And I think that's a natural transition to something that I found fascinating was I didn't look at this until an hour before we recorded because I'm generally pretty loath to look at the people who I respect. I'm loath to look at their stuff while I'm still doing my analysis on them or anyone else. And did you look at Kevin Pelton's stats projections?
I knew that they were pretty high just because I listened to a Lock podcast about it recently.
So I didn't. I hadn't heard anything that Knueppel was second in the stats only projections for Pelton's model, and part of that, which is what tied in with the Georgia Tech game, was the AAU stuff in 22 and 23, where he at that point had 35 usage and posted 64% true shooting, and so the idea that he could do a little bit more if he were asked to do it, and I don't think watching the film on Knueppel, I don't see on ball star here, but I do see opportunistic and maybe with development, maybe there's a little bit more upside there's more upside with him on ball than there is for a lot of these other shooter types that we've invoked in this. I don't think it's a good bet, but I think it is a bet where for like thinking back to Connect or thinking back to Grady Dick, where that wasn't a bet at all.
Yeah, I teased this at the beginning of like, well, what player type is he really? And we'd be quick to typecast him in a shooter. And some of the comparisons that we've made, most of them, in fact, have been in that ilk. He is a way better handle than any of the guys that we've mentioned so far.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a way better passer than any of the guys that we've mentioned so far as a possible comp. And so I actually think, especially when you consider the AAU stats and what he was able to do when Flag was out. Now, he's maybe just as too slow to bring the ball up, which is kind of a concern for me.
Oh, I have a note on that. I thought that you wouldn't want him to bring the ball up just because he doesn't create an advantage by moving fast. He's just too slow.
However, I think there's actually a chance he could be an all-star. I think it's
Wow.
actually I don't think that's totally insane. Like I think he's like a really good passer. I love what he's able to do off the dribble. I think maybe he could improve his athleticism some. And like the NBA is very much a strength league at this point. Like he actually has some like Luca-esque elements to his game, just in
Mm.
terms of like being able to get to spots. Now he doesn't have the floater, but in terms of like getting around the basket and like pump faking, like I wish his arms were a little bit longer. I think that's probably the big, more so than the athleticism. I think that's the biggest thing that could possibly hold him back. So I'm not predicting that he'll be an all-star. But if you compare him to like VJ Edgecombe, for example, who I think everyone would say Edgecombe is way higher upside than Knueppel, I totally disagree with that. I think Knueppel has more upside. Now,
Well,
Knueppel is not like a great like movement shooter. Like there are some things where maybe he's not as high on just like the pure shooting aspects. But I really think that there's more. I think he could be a very good. Another comp that actually came to me was Austin Reeves.
mhm.
As now, I think he's a way better shooter at a younger age, but I think he also can actually be more physical defensively than Reeves and just be stronger. Um, so, but like that's when we're like his handle is really good in short areas. You didn't see it that much like in space, the attacking guys. I'm not sure against bigger players, like he's gonna get shit down. He's not gonna beat bigger
Um,
players in an ISO necessarily. But that's again, I'm not predicting that, but I think that there is something like I like the guy's feel. I like his skill level. I like his dribbling ability. He is really good as a connector. I think he could even be better than anticipated on defense for a lot of people as well. So this is just this type of player where like this guy really he's got skills in a lot of areas. He's because he's unathletic and has short arms, he could easily be overlooked. It's like
hmm.
it just kind of raised my spidey sense a little bit. Like there could be more here than a lot of people think.
Little old me thinking that I have Knueppel over VJ over Edgecombe and in a different tier. Like preliminarily, I haven't done my board yet. Like thinking that that was hot, and it's like no. I mean, and again, I know you're not saying like he's
Yeah,
definite all
I
star.
I have a feeling. I don't know. I kind of have this feeling that like Edgecombe is one of these guys who everyone thinks somebody else is going to take, and then nobody ends up taking him. I mean, obviously someone will take him, but like early, I'm just his inability to really fit in is concerning me. Whereas Knueppel is gonna like offensively, he's gonna fit it. He'll fit anywhere. He can shoot. He could probably even really almost play the
Um,
three on offense. Like he can play on the ball. He can play off the ball. He can come off screens. Like the other thing that stuck out to me is he just like no, he'll always run in for an offensive rebound, see if he can get one. He doesn't get it very often because he can't jump, but he's like he's
well,
looking he's just a guy who's always looking to do stuff out there.
and speaking of that, there was a play. I wish I remember which game it was where Knueppel he kind of went in for the offensive rebound, but then he ended up deflecting like the first pass that the other team made. It's like, oh, that's a nice little thing that guys don't do super often. And so Keandre brought up Hupinelec brought up Desmond Bain as a potential comp, and I thought that was intriguing as well. Of somebody
Yeah,
so we didn't scout Bain because he was deeper on the board, ended up going 30th in draft, 4-year player at TCU, and I think there's some of that. Now Bain was one hell of a shooter towards the end of his college tenure, and he's been a really good shooter in the pros already. Um, but I think that
yeah,
the
but I would say somewhat similar shot form as well, where it's really just
mhm.
more of a set shot type.
Yeah, and I think that's a reasonable comp. And
That
Bain,
that
his
that's man, and Keandre is so good.
he
That's
is
a really good one.
it is,
I think
and
as like a high end possibility. That's a
exactly,
really good one.
and also like Bain, he's not the greatest defensive player, but he competes, and he's not usually like the point of failure. And I think that's a line that Knueppel might end up walking as well. And he'll be out there, he'll make teams better, that sort of stuff. And it's fascinating. I wasn't sure if we were going to agree on him. But we're closer than I think you and I are closer than a lot of other people are, and that's part of the fun of the way we do this. I mean, it is kind of speculative because some of it, like the defense, it is our understanding of how the NBA is a strength league more than it used to be, and for his shooting, some of it is what he can do versus and has at other stops, but like he's he's fascinating. And so what players who have this limited athleticism and size. Like, I mean, you'd love it if he could defend, if he could be more of a three, if he could, of course, if he could defend threes and fours, even if it was poorly, just to do that kind of thing. But
Yeah, I think he could switch on to some guys. It's really more the challenging of the eventual mid ranger rather than that because he's not. I think he can avoid getting back down too
yeah,
easily. It's more just that, like, once if the guy decides to turn and shoot
gets
over
to
him and
their
can
off
jump, he's just not going to get a good challenge on it. Probably.
exactly. And so that's and also like it's his. I'm a little bit lower, not that much lower on Knueppel's handle than you are, but if you don't have the burst to back it up, then it's hard to beat guys very often. And so I think it'll be more opportunistic, even if there is some upside potential that other guys don't have.
Yeah,
But
a couple things I want to add too before we
sure.
change the subject. He like that triple threat game is really good, and then also changing speeds
Hmm.
is pretty solid, and just knowing when to attack and in pick and roll, when to wait for things to develop. So yeah, and I think like his three ball too, he shoots a set shot, but I think it'll be pretty conducive to like the no dip three
Sure.
as
I,
well.
I had I had
So
that in my notes too.
yeah, yeah. So I'll let you finish up then. I think I've
No,
pretty much said everything.
yeah. So I mean, the to me the true like superstar, and I'm a little bit lower on All Star. Like it is, I'm gonna say it's theoretically possible, but you just generally don't see. I mean, I brought up Desmond Bain, and like it's hard to reach that kind of a level, and it's possible, but it's hard. But because of Knueppel's the mental part of his game, the building blocks he already has in terms of a shot, and the skill level for a player of this type coming in at a young age, I like him more than a lot of these guys. And so where that fits in for this overall draft class will take more time. It's going to be, where we see the rest of these players, but I like a lot more of this than some of these guys.
Nope, I agree with you. All right, then. Well, that will do it for Dunked On. Of course, we will be doing playback for game one of the NBA Finals, playback.tv/Nate Duncan NBA. Please join us on that. And of course, we will have the mock off season coming up in June at some point. Won't reveal the exact date yet, but should definitely sign up for Dunked On Prime to grab that. In the meantime, we'll surely be doing our sale in honor of the mock off season quite soon. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll talk to you all very soon.